In a hidden corner of a galactic sanctuary, a small dragon sat abandoned, marked as too dangerous, too unpredictable, and sentenced to a future of cold experiments. But when a quiet boy noticed the strange, shifting symbols glowing on the creature's necklace, he uncovered a secret that could change everything. A secret that held the power to turn rejection into destiny and loneliness into an unbreakable bond. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, then tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The sanctuary liked its corridors bright and its whispers soft. People drifted past glass habitats with cups of cocoa and curious eyes, pausing at creatures that sparkled or sang. When they reached the end of a quiet hall, many simply walked on. Behind the last pane, a small dragon lay folded into himself like origami. His name on the placard was Sable. He wasn't huge or fearsome. He had scales the color of green sea glass and fine wings tucked tight. What made families hurry away wasn't his size. It was the red tag beneath his name, non-adoptable. There were stories, none confirmed, all told in half-breaths. Too strange, too unknown, too unpredictable. Milo Fern stood longer than most. He was not a tap-the-glass sort of kid. He carried a pocket notebook with sketches of beetles and street cats and cloud shapes, and he read every line on the information panel, even when there was almost nothing to read. Sable had arrived without papers, drifting in a damaged cargo skiff near the lunar shipping lanes. No registry, no chip, only a thin metallic band fused to his scales like a collar that hadn't been meant as a collar at all. "Don't lean, please," said Nora Vale, the attendant with patient eyes. She spoke gently, not like a scolding. He startles at sudden movement. "I won't," Milo said. He kept his voice low. "Does he talk?" "Not in a way we understand," Nora replied. "We tried translators. We tried everything. The band won't come off without hurting him." Director Vereen Holt passed with the step of a busy person. "Keep the line moving," she told Nora, then gave Milo a brief nod. "It's not a petting zoo, young man." Milo didn't argue. He just watched. Sable didn't lift his head, but his eyelids shifted the way sleepy cats do when they're listening. The band around his neck had etchings that looked like letters until you stared too long. Then they looked like tiny maps. Then, like nothing at all. Milo took 2 photos and compared them in his notebook. The symbols were not the same. Not exactly. It was a tiny difference, the kind that hides in plain sight if you're rushing. The lines seemed to flex a degree or two, as if the markings changed with angle rather than time. "What do you see?" asked Luis Ortiz, the night janitor, pushing a quiet vacuum. "I think that band isn't a tag," Milo whispered. "I think it's a language that hates being flat." "A language that hates being flat," Luis repeated with a smile. "That's the best sentence I'll hear today." The red tag bothered Milo more than the warnings. A transfer was scheduled to a research center across the system. He pictured cold lights, clipped voices, the sort of learning that doesn't ask permission. On the ride back to the hotel, his parents chatted about dinner options. Milo stared at his phone and turned the photos of the band into a tiny slideshow. The symbols drifted with perspective, as if the message needed the third dimension to breathe. That night, he borrowed his mother's old star mapping app, the one that fit constellations onto ceiling freckles. He fed in the 2 photos, asked the app to align them as points in space, and added an experimental third camera angle by estimating what the missing lines would do if they were trying to meet in the middle. The app stalled, then hummed. The screen built a lattice in slow, glowing strokes. When the shape locked, words formed not as letters, but as a calm idea. Guardian Navigator Unit T9. Origin, Altair Station. Return if found. Milo's heart kicked. He'd read about Altair Station in school. A debris cascade had destroyed it 5 years ago. Most records were fragmented. If Sable had come from there, then someone somewhere had designed him for a job, not a cage. He tried sleeping. It didn't work. A thought arrived like a soft knock. If a message asks to be answered, and you understand it, doesn't that make you responsible? Toward midnight, he found Luis sweeping near the side gate in the sanctuary's service lot. "You again," Luis said. "Do not tell me you're here to polish the floor." "I need 2 minutes," Milo said. "Not to touch anything, just to stand where the angle is right." Luis looked at the stars above the parking lamps. "My life keeps getting stranger." He swiped his badge. 2 minutes and I'm your chaperone. We'll call it a lost and found search for a missing pencil. Inside, the corridors wore night lighting. Habitats sang with soft machine rhythms. At Sable's pane, Milo stood still, hands at his sides. "Hello," he said, as if speaking to a shy neighbor. "I think your band is a navigator code." Sable lifted his head. The band warmed from dull to a willow leaf glow. A small tone sounded, like a dropped bead hitting water. "See?" Milo whispered. Nora's voice crackled on a distant intercom. "Lockdown drill in 5 minutes. Staff, clear the maintenance walkways." Lewis touched Milo's shoulder. Our 2 minutes became 1. Milo put his notebook to the glass, showing the 3-dimensional lattice he had drawn from the app's rendering. The band brightened once, then steadied, as if a door had heard a knock. "I'll bring someone who can answer you properly," he promised. "Just hold on." The drill siren rose through the floor. Lewis guided Milo back the way they came. When they reached the service door, Milo looked over his shoulder. Sable was standing now, not tall, but present, the way a lighthouse is present even before it lights. In the hallway, Lewis said, "If you start something brave, make sure you also start the part where you ask for help." "I will," Milo said. "I already know who to ask." And for the first time since anyone could remember, Sable paced his space with intent, like a traveler tracing the edges of a map he might soon leave. Morning brought ordinary noises: a kettle, shoelaces, a weather app mumbling about rain. Milo showed his mother the star mapping analysis and the lattice sketch. She read quietly. Her work was in community health, not space physics, but she knew the difference between guessing and seeing. She made 3 calls, then a 4th. By noon, the sanctuary scheduled a meeting with outside advisors. "No promises," she told Milo. "Only a chance." Director Holt looked wary as the conference room filled. Professor Hannah Mir from the Ethics Council, Curator Adele Renfrew from Historical Preservation, and a retired explorer with steady hands named Captain Rohan Keats. He had spent years near the Altair corridor and had a voice like an old violin. "Show me the creature," Captain Keats said. At the glass, Sable watched the group as if he had expected them all along. The band dimmed in the bright day, but when Captain Keats stepped forward and spoke in a calm cadence, the light returned like a slow sunrise. "Guardian Unit T9, said the captain. "Override Keats' September string." He pronounced the syllables like a remembered song. The band answered with a soft shimmer and a tiny halo of cymbals. Nora gasped, then covered her mouth. The reply was gentle. "Voice match accepted. Status requested?" Navigator status, said the captain. The symbol sketched the shape of a body as light, every wing vein and spine ridge drawn in lines. Systems, nominal. Minor wing membrane damage, healing. Primary function, paused. Awaiting partner. Awaiting partner? Professor Mir repeated. Does that mean... ... A new line scrolled along the inner surface of the band. Temporary link. Milo Fern. Compatibility, 96%. Director Holt rubbed her brow. He is a child. A child who pays attention, Curator Renfrew said softly. Attention is not a certification. No, Captain Keats agreed, but it's how every certification begins. The debate that followed was full of care and caution. Professor Mir spoke of rights and welfare. Curator Renfrew spoke of history as something living, not dead. Director Holt asked practical questions about safety and training. Milo listened, a small mountain of hope and nerves. The agreement, when it arrived, was a bridge rather than a gate. Sable would move to a climate-safe habitat in the Fern family's backyard, built under the sanctuary's standards. Shared guardianship. The sanctuary, the ethics council, historical preservation, and Captain Keats as trainer and advisor. Frequent check-ins. Emergency protocols. No experiments. Only observation and supported bonding. Any sign of stress, and the plan would pause. This is not a pet agreement, Professor Mir told Milo gently. This is a partnership with a living mind. I understand, Milo said, and he meant it. Installation week smelled like sawdust and rain. Neighbors peered over fences. A crane lifted clear panels into the yard, forming a bright aviary with heated sand, a water shelf, and a perch facing the eastern sky. Captain Keats arrived with a case of training modules and a thermos he never seemed to finish. He taught Milo the calm syntax used by navigators, short requests, steady tone, clear intent. These creatures do not obey, he explained. They cooperate with purpose. You will not own him, you will ally with him. On moving day, the sanctuary transport hummed to the curb. Sable stepped carefully from the low cradle, wings held close, head neither bowed nor thrown high. He paused at the threshold, tasting air like a sailor judging wind. Milo kept his hands behind his back. Welcome, he said. No hurry. The band gave a small answering tone. Then Sable walked inside and explored each corner with deliberate patience. He tested the water shelf, pressed a palm of his paw to the heated sand, and finally settled on the perch with the slow ease of someone who has forgotten how to rest and is practicing again. Days found a rhythm. Mornings began with check-ins. Guardian T9, environmental review. Evenings ended with quiet conversation that was not made of words, but of presence. The band translated when needed, but more often it simply brightened when a thought was shared well enough. One afternoon, while Milo sorted homework under the maple tree, Sable padded out and stood beside him. The band flickered. Parameters required, came the soft translation. Purpose of function. Milo looked up, startled. A mission. Right. He thought of all the wild trying that had led them here. How about exploration and discovery, he said. Near and kind. Maps made for care. The band warmed. Parameters accepted, it said. Initiate mapping. Their walks began small. 2 streets, a creek bend, the roofline of a single block. Sable sensed terrain in layers no instrument could file, and Milo labeled the layers with stories. That's Mrs. Vega's blue mailbox, he would say. She writes letters to her sister every Sunday. Or, the cat that sleeps on that porch is named Onion. He belongs to no one and everyone. He learned that when Sable was content, the wing membranes glowed like moon jelly, and when he was worried, the spines flattened in a ripple that asked for space. Sometimes the band projected soft pictures while they rested. A corridor of starlight, the gentle spin of a navigation pod, faces blurred by time but lit by trust. Captain Keats studied those projections with quiet eyes. "He remembers without pain now," the captain said at last. "The bond is doing what it was designed to do, make memory a bridge instead of a weight." Milo didn't say he could feel it too, not as a voice, but as a way of noticing the world that made him stand straighter and breathe more slowly. One evening, clouds built over the hills in the way they do when weather is planning something. Thunder sounded far away. Like a promise, Sable stood at the aviary door and lifted his head. The band brightened to a clear, alert tone. "Anomaly?" Milo asked. "Disturbance detected," the band translated. "Gravitational pattern irregular." Milo's phone showed a storm advisory. Nothing dramatic. He looked from the screen to Sable's intent face and felt the thin line where ordinary ends and responsibility begins. "Let's tell the grown-ups," he said, "and then let's be brave." The storm rolled in like drums under the floor. Neighborhood feeds warned of heavy rain and simple flooding. Sable's band drew a different picture in the air. A moving spiral, narrow as a spear, headed toward the elementary school's gym, where people usually sheltered during storms. "It's not on any radar," Milo's father said, frowning at his phone. "Not all danger arrives wearing a name we recognize." Captain Keats murmured, "Navigators were built because our best instruments have blind spots." Professor Meir called the school with a cautious plan. Relocate sheltering families to the East Wing away from the gym, as a precaution tied to a research model. The principal, unsure but careful, agreed. Texts pinged. Volunteers moved cots and water jugs. The sky grew a shade darker than the hour deserved. "Can we divert it?" Milo asked Sable. The band replied softly. "Intervention capacity low. Recommend evacuation." They followed that advice. Milo's parents knocked on doors. Luis helped relay messages. Nora stood in a church lot, shepherding families into a sturdier hall, while rain began its silver work. Then the projection shifted. The spiral drifted north, toward the houses that hadn't yet cleared. Sable's spines rose, like grass in a wind. He unfolded his wings for the first time in open weather, and the membranes gleamed with a faint pattern as if remembering maps. "No," Milo started, but the band offered a message both simple and complete. "Guardians protect." Sable leaped. He wasn't fast. He was precise. Each stroke of his wings placed him exactly where he needed to be, as if the air had steps only he could see. Lightning made a brief white frame around him. Thunder followed with a softened growl. He entered the dense heart of the storm and vanished like a green thought returning to the forest. People later said the clouds made a shape you could not swear to. Some heard a sound like glass chords played gently. Some felt pressure lift from their ears and from their worries at the same time. What no one argued about was the change. The spiral untwisted, the rain calmed, and a hush like a held breath being released passed over the town. When the sky cleared enough to look, Sable was nowhere in sight. Search groups formed before anyone told them to. Captain Keats brought a small case that hummed for navigator traces. Curator Renfrew launched a slow drone that made a patient circle over the woods. Nora kept a notebook of who had gone where, while Luis handed out apples and water bottles with the steady kindness that keeps group hearts from fraying. Milo searched until the edges of things blurred. Just before dawn, as he dozed on the porch steps, the band's tone sounded in his mind, even though he wasn't wearing it. A small image hovered over the yard, like a memory you could touch, a map of the nature preserve, a pulse near a stand of cedar. He took his bike and rode. He didn't think about permission or breakfast. The road was new-washed and smelled like wet stone. He found Sable in a clearing beside a fallen log, wing bent at an angle that asked for stillness. The band pulsed weakly, as if keeping a light on for a late friend. "I'm here," Milo said, kneeling. "I'm here." The translation was faint and warm. "Mission complete. Reserves low." "I'll get help," Milo said, standing, then stopping because Sable's tail made the smallest curl around his wrist, not to hold him, just to keep him in the moment. "Protocol available," the band whispered. "Preservation transfer. Requires consent." Milo's throat tightened. "What do I say?" The band gave him a sequence, like a prayer. He spoke it carefully. A glow formed between the band and the center of his chest. Not a beam, more a seam being stitched with light. Thoughts and feelings moved without words. Milo's mind filled with soft star maps, with the sensation of reading wind by listening to his bones, with the faces of the people who had designed a life that knew how to choose care, even at the end. He held on to his own name, the way you hold on to a tree in a current, and the current turned into a sharing rather than a taking. When the light thinned, Sable lay very still. The band slipped free into Milo's hands, warm as a living thing. The clearing felt both deeply empty and newly complete. Captain Keats arrived just after sunrise, led by his device and by the knowledge in his face that endings and beginnings often share a doorway. He knelt and did not rush to speak. Milo told him everything in a few sentences and a long silence. The captain listened the way you listen to tides. At last, he said, "They taught us about a final safeguard we never used, a way to send what matters forward. I think he trusted you to carry him well." They brought Sable home with honor. The ceremonies were quiet and green. Curator Renfrew pressed ashes into an emerald stone and set it into the band's smooth inner ring. Neighbors left flowers that smelled like sunrise after rain. Director Holt attended without speeches, placed her palm to the glass of the empty aviary, and stayed a long time. Milo wore the band because it felt less like wearing and more like remembering what he already knew. He did not hear a separate voice. Instead, the way he noticed the world grew deeper. He could walk a new alley and know the softest way to turn. He could look at the sky and guess the hour a storm would soften. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes at night, the darkness arranged itself into corridors that led not to fear, but to wonder. "What happens now?" Professor Mir asked gently, 6 months later during a routine check-in. Milo touched the band with 2 fingers. "We keep our mission," he said. "Exploration and discovery. Kind maps. No rush. No conquering. Just learning how to see." Captain Keats smiled like someone who has spent a lifetime coming home. That sounds like proper navigation. Summer leaned into autumn with that small shiver of wind that makes leaves tell secrets. Milo walked the neighborhood at dusk, practicing a new kind of listening that was not about noise. The band warmed when someone needed help. A stroller stuck on a curb, a ladder wobbling, a kid searching for a striped hat near the park bench. None of this looked like heroism. All of it felt like purpose. The town began to treat the aviary as a quiet landmark. Schools arranged field visits where children learned to sit still for 2 minutes and notice what their noticing taught them. Nora hosted a gentle science afternoon once a month, where families touched models of wing membranes and traced constellations printed on the floor. Lewis painted a mural on the outer wall, a small dragon made of waterways and trees, and a boy holding a compass shaped like a seed. In early spring, a research coalition invited Milo and his parents to a coastal observatory. They had been designing a humane navigation program that paired human intuition with non-invasive sensing. They wanted to study Milo's expanded perception with care and transparency. No needles, only puzzles, maps, and conversations. Professor Mir reviewed the protocol with a highlighter and a raised eyebrow. She approved it, then brought homemade cookies to the first session because ethics should taste like welcome, too. The work was not about turning Milo into a machine. It was about learning how empathy becomes accuracy. They tested how he predicted wind over short hills, how he read river shifts by watching birds, how he located quiet in a noisy room. Sometimes the band made a soft tone as if amused and proud. One evening, after a day of mapping currents by watching kelp sway, Milo sat on the observatory roof with Captain Keats. The sky stitched itself with early stars. "I do not miss the old ways," the captain said. "We moved so fast, we forgot to ask the world if it wanted to be hurried." Milo nodded. "Sable taught me that speed is not the same as grace." Down on the pier, a small rescue boat stood ready for the season's storms. The new program had placed gentle sensors on its mast. No drilling, no cutting, just temporary fittings that could be removed without a trace. The boat's crew did drills that looked like choreography. Practiced, kind, alert. All. The first real test came when a fog bank rolled in heavy as wool. Visibility was poor. Radio chatter felt cluttered. Milo stood at the pier and closed his eyes. He pictured the harbor as a dark room filled with sleeping cats. You move carefully when you respect the sleepers. He traced an invisible path for the boat with 2 fingers and a breath. The captain on duty followed that path without asking why it felt right. They found a fisherman whose engine had given up and a kayaker who had drifted beyond his comfort. No sirens, no drama, only steady hands and quiet voices. Afterward, the rescue crew wrote in their log, "Uncomplicated save, guided by soft map." Words spread less like a headline and more like a story your neighbor tells you over soup. Organizations asked for the training manual. Captain Keats and Professor Mir worked with the team to write one that began with a sentence in big letters. "Go slow enough to be kind." Milo laughed at that page. "We can have one rule," he said. Just that. As months turned to more months, Milo felt the band change in texture under his fingertips, the way well-kept wood changes when you rub it every day. Some evenings, he felt a quiet burst of joy for no reason he could explain. He learned not to search for reasons. He learned to let joy be a reason all by itself. On the anniversary of the storm, the town gathered at the aviary. No speeches, no statues. Instead, they planted a row of native trees along the creek and placed small stones with simple words near the roots. Care, listen, share, begin. Children were given paper compasses drawn by a local artist, with a line on the back that read, "Map something kind today." Milo stood with his parents, with Luis and Nora, with Curator Renfrew, who had brought seed packets, and with Captain Keats, who had new laugh lines from smiling. The evening smelled like mint and soil. A breeze moved through the maples, making a sound like pages turning. He touched the band. It warmed, not as a machine, but as a friend who understood without asking. He did not hear words. He felt agreement. He felt the sense of a wing stretching into a future that had room for gentleness. People sometimes asked him if he missed the old shape of Sable, the green and the wings and the careful gaze. He always answered honestly. Of course, he would say, but nothing good has been lost. It has only been rearranged so we can carry it together. That night, before sleep, he drew a map in his notebook. No borders, only paths. A trail by the creek, a route between two benches where neighbors like to talk, a line from the aviary to the observatory, a dotted arc to a little library box where someone had left a note that read, "Take hope, leave worry." He added a small symbol near the edge, a circle with a leaf inside. He decided that would be their sign for begin again. Then he set the notebook down and looked out the window. The sky was ordinary and enormous. He pressed 2 fingers to the band and whispered the mission they had chosen together on that early day when everything was new and frightening and bright. Exploration and discovery, he said, near and kind. In the quiet that followed, he felt the familiar presence not as a separate mind, but as a shared way of leaning toward the world. It was not a voice. It was an understanding. It was a compass that pointed to people, to places, to possibilities, always toward the next small good thing. And in that gentle direction, they walked, boy and guardian, memory and map, proving that when loyalty finds love, it doesn't end a story. It opens a door that never closes.